Hello and welcome. I call the channel the Jungle Nook, and today I'm working on three different plants that I am trying to propagate here, all of which are capable of growing really large leaves. And I'm going to show how I'm propagating them. Each I'm doing slightly different, and I'll explain why I'm doing what I'm doing and how it is helping to encourage these plants to grow these real large leaves immediately after propagating them. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the differences between water roots and soil roots, and how, depending on how you're going to propagate your propagations, what to expect, what some of the benefits or risks may be between the two, and how that will influence the initial growth rate of the plants that you're propagating. One of the first varieties that we'll be working on will be of this Monstera right here. And we're just going to be taking some node cuttings and starting them in water. They'll be growing water roots. That's how we're starting these guys right here. And then after we work on these, we're going to be working on this moss pole over here with this golden pothos. Now golden pothos, if you grow it up, it will get much larger leaves. And if you look at this guy right here, it's got some pretty nice sized leaves on it already, but believe it or not, these are still young and mature leaves. They're small leaves. They can get over 2.5 feet long and actually get fenestrations very similar to the Monstera we were just looking at. And what we're going to be doing on this one is what's called a chop and extend. We're going to be removing the top portion of this pole and putting that into a pot and extending it with another pole on top of this. And over here I got some more Monsteras, or I'm sorry, some more of the golden pothos just to show you. This is how you typically see it growing out of pots. I like this look too, but as this vine grows, it gets leggier and leggier. The leaves get smaller and smaller. Growing it up on that moss pole, the roots are able to grow right into the moss, and each leaf actually, or each node, has its own root structure. And that helps to encourage it to grow larger leaves. And you want the vine to just keep growing, so by removing the top part and then extending it, you can keep that vine, the growing part of the vine, just keep it growing up. Then finally, we're going to be working on this Albo Monstera here. Now, these guys here, or any of the Monsteras with the variegation, they can be a little more finicky to propagate. And the way that I'm going to propagate this, I think, will ensure almost 100% success rate for all of my propagations off of this plant. So this room here is where we're going to be working on these guys. I call this the nook. It's the largest and it's the main growing room here. So the Monsteras that we're working with first, I had very similar plants out on the porch that I couldn't bring in. They were too large. I didn't have the room. So what I did is I cut the tips, the growing tip of the vine, and I stuck that into some water. I cut it right below the node, put it in some water, and water roots started growing out of the aerial roots right here. Now, with these guys, if you look, this vine, I don't know if you can see, but this vine, look how big that is compared to my finger. Now, this same vine right here, growing up, because it's growing up, look at how big the vine is now. And that's what I want. I want the thicker part of the vine and a node that is growing a large leaf. But I also wanted the growing tip, because if we had just taken a cutting in between the two nodes, it would take longer for it to be able to grow a new leaf out, to grow a new vine. So I'm using the tips of a nice, healthy, thick vine And I put that into some water. And because I put it into water where the aerial roots are, they started growing actual water roots. You can see how white they are. Usually they'd be tan or a little bit darker or brown color. But these are actually all water roots. And when you start a cutting in water and then you let it grow its roots and you put these water roots into soil, the root structure, the cell structure is going to take time to change and actually turn into soil roots. By putting it into water, it grew these roots much quicker, but they are tender. They're more delicate. You got to be careful when planting them. And it's going to take time for these roots to develop into actual soil roots. The water roots can take soil up, or I'm sorry, can take the moisture and nutrients up real easy. It's got to actually grow a different type of root, a soil root, in order to adequately take up moisture and nutrients out of soil. So this plant's not going to be concentrating on starting the vine growing and putting out a new leaf until first it has these roots all taken care of. Now, something that I did not do that I would recommend you doing, when you take a cutting, first you're going to want to water that plant really good. Make sure it's well hydrated before you take a cutting. Then when you make your cutting right below the node, you want to let that plant just sit for, an hour or so it can form a callus over where I cut it. Otherwise it can be soft and mushy. It can actually rot, which is exactly what is happening right here. So I am going to make a cut. I'm one-handed. I'm gonna have to make a cut, not with these scissors. So, like I said, water the plant really good for a few days before you make your cut below the node. And then you want to let the node just sit here for about an hour or so that it can form a callus over where we made the cutting. And this one seems fine. I'm going to be putting this into a pot that has really good drainage. There's a lot of little slits and holes down here. There's also a tray so that all the water can drain out and away from the roots. This right here is mostly coco coir. It's got some slow release fertilizers in it, as well as a little bit of perlite. Just gonna fill this up about a little over a third of the way. I'm gonna add to that some perlite, and that will help with aeration and drainage. Not too particular about the amounts. I'm gonna put kind of a lot in there. I do water my plants almost every day, so I need really good drainage. And this plant will be in this pot probably for a few years. So to start out with, I'm putting in some orchid bark, which is basically tree bark. And this will break down real slow over time and provide a constant supply of fresh compost or nutrients to the plant. Just give that a good mix. All right, and I just waited a little while so that where I made that cut, where it was starting to rot, where I had a chance to dry out and form a little bit of a callus on it. And now I'm gonna put these in here. These roots are real tender, so I don't want to really pack it in or disturb them too much. Now I'll do the other one. And then I'm just gonna use just some of this pure potting mix right here on top. I don't like to have a lot of perlite in that top layer. That first layer with the perlite and the orchid bark, that's what I consider my drainage layer, as well as my nutrient layer. That's where all that bark is. And then I just top dress it with this because I like how it's darker looking. Just a personal preference of mine. Push too hard, but I do also want it to be somewhat firm. And this aerial root right here that did not have water roots, that's growing, well, it's going right into the pot. This will start to root too, and that will put soil roots on it right away. So it is going to take a little bit more time before this plant starts putting out new foliage because they were water roots. If I had made these cuttings, and put them straight into this pot the way it is, and started watering it, it would have taken a little longer for the roots to develop, but those roots would have been better suited for the soil, and actually we would have gotten newer growth up here a little bit quicker. The reason I did what I did and put them straight into the water was I didn't have time to do all this. I was doing other things at the time and it was getting cold out and I had to get them in the house. Now I will be putting some stakes into this. So this is two different sections of pole attached right here. The top piece is just slid into here. And what I'm going to do is the bottom piece actually extends down to here. So I am going to cut this node right down here. I'm actually going to remove this leaf. I should have removed that leaf a couple days ago. And now that I am cutting this below that node, I am actually going to now wait a little while so that this can form a callus. This is going to be in the soil. And because it's in the soil, I don't want this to rot and pathogens to get in and infect this plant. So I'm just going to wait a little while so a callus can form right there. I'm actually going to cut this off right here too so they're not touching. And we'll be right back. Sticking it all the way down to the bottom. Now I already put the same drainage and nutrient layer mixture in here at the very bottom. And then just fill it up with this. And I have a video on how I make these moss poles. I'll put a box up at the end of the video for you if you're interested. The pot actually isn't where most of the roots are going to be. Most of the roots are going to be in the moss pole. It's real important to keep it moist. And that's where a lot of the roots, the majority of the roots are. The pole is actually an extension of the pot. And what I did with this one, I could have just left it growing up. I could have did this sooner, but I kind of wanted it to trail down a little bit, and then I'm going to reattach it to the pole, and then it will start growing up again, just so it would be fuller down here. As you can see, the leaves are already a bit smaller because it's not attached and it doesn't have the roots in it and it's not growing up. But it's going to start going up it and it'll get big leaves real quick again. So now what I'm going to do is put a stake in this. And this one's a lot more heavy duty compared to the first ones. I know it's going to be getting really large leaves and top heavy. I was already having issues with that one wanting to tip over. And then I'm just going to use some zip ties to attach it. I know I'm not getting into a lot of detail about what this pole is or how I made it, but like I said, I do have a video if you're interested, and you guys can watch that. I'll put it up at the end of the video. So back here where the pole is, that pole that's adding the support, that'll be the side that will be facing a wall. And what I'm going to do on the front, I got some of these Velcro strips. I'm going to attach this, which started growing down. I'm going to attach this. So that the nodes and the aerial roots are in contact with that moss. Whoa, almost knocked it right over. Wouldn't that have been great? So now we're going to start working on the Albo Monstera, which is not as hardy as the first one we did, the Monstera deliosus, or delioso, I'll put it in text, I pronounce everything wrong. But that first Monstera that we did, that's a real good plant for beginners. It grows really well. It takes a minimal amount of care. It's really resilient. This guy, not so much, and this is by far the most expensive plant I have in my collection. So I'm going to take some extra care in propagating this. And before I even propagate it, I got to get it prepared for propagation. Now, when I got this plant, this was the newest leaf on the plant. And I have real low humidity in the house, as you can see. I got some browning on some of the leaves. And that was because I have low humidity and it wasn't used to that. So I wanted this plant to be able to adapt to the humidity levels that are in this house. And all the new leaves, as you can see, they're small, but they're pretty much perfect. And I just left this alone until it could get used to the environment in this house. And I also wanted to make sure that it had a good root structure on it. So I didn't know what was in this pot. I just left it be. Just let those roots grow, let the new foliage grow. And now I'm going to be putting it into this pot with a moss pole. So there's a couple of different reasons why this is going onto a moss pole. The big one is I want the roots, those aerial roots, to grow into the moss pole. So each node already has its own root structure as I begin actually propagating that plant. Also, the vine where I attach it to the new moss pole will be much thicker, the leaves will start getting bigger, and when it comes time for actual propagation, I'll have much better stock to work with, so I have a larger plant with a greater chance of success. I've watched a lot of videos where people are trying to propagate these in water, and we've already talked about how those roots are more delicate, and if you don't keep them moist enough, they'll dry out real easy because they're actually water roots, and then that root can start to rot, and these plants are really susceptible to root rot and disease and things like that. So I'm going to be starting it in the moss pole, and when you start a plant in moss, that actually is a root that is like halfway between a water root and a soil root. So the root's in a much better position to be healthy and grow, and really reduces the chance of rot or the propagation not taking hold. And this is an expensive plant, and I don't want to lose any of the propagations. I would like to eventually start selling these at some point in the future. So, for the moss pole, what I'm going to be doing is using that golden pothos, the lower end of it. Ooh, don't want to break my legs. So one more thing that I'm going to do with this guy right here is take some of his aerial roots and actually bring them in contact, slide them right inside of that moss. And then up here, doing this all one-handed, over here, do the same thing. The aerial roots are now going, well, a few of them are going right into the moss. and I have attached the vine right up against the pole. It's important to keep the pole moist. You don't want it to dry out. They dry out quite quickly, and that will cause the roots to dry out. I like them. I even like the fact that they dry out quick because the moisture is evaporating and it's helping to stabilize the moisture within the house. Also, as the moisture evaporates off this, it's right around the plant to keep that nice and stable right directly around the plant. But you can take a water bottle and just put a water bottle right in here, slide it right in, and have some holes in there where it real slowly drips out. So you can go days without having to water it, or you could leave for the weekend or even longer depending on the size of the bottle. What I will do when I am ready to actually propagate this, the vine will be all the way up to the top. I may even put another piece up here so it can grow even higher and have a longer vine with more nodes growing into this moss pole. And then what I will do is I will actually probably just cut the moss pole down here somewhere, cut the vine, remove the whole top part. I will cut in between each node, take that existing root structure, and I will actually be able to just put that right into some soil, because in the moss it will be a combination of water and soil roots. Put that right into some soil and be able to start a whole bunch of these. I would think I should be able to, if I put an extension up an extra foot or two, I should be able to get maybe a dozen new plants out of this. When I do that, I will put another extension into the piece that I leave at the bottom, but I'll also take at least one of the new cuttings and I will be putting that right down in here. So I only have one vine in here. I'd like to have two. Have it be a fuller plant. But yeah, I'm real excited about this guy right here.